Greetings from South Wales, where it's all quiet now, but I say a few minutes ago, probably an hour or so ago now, John Egan's 97th minute volley rescued a deserved point for Hull City. It finishes 2-2 against Swansea City. Breathless second half, really. An awful first 40 minutes of the game. And it kind of blew to life when Vipotnik scored 5 minutes before half-time to give Swansea the lead out of absolutely nothing. Yeah, Swansea had threatened loosely. They'd had a bit of pressure, cut a few corners. The goalkeeper, Ivo Panda, never made a save. And then defensively, they were poor. Ball into Vipotnik. He turns Hughes and rifles in the bottom corner. 1-0, 5 minutes to go until half-time. But to be fair to City, they came back, they kept going. Lovely ball from Hadzimatovic, who swept it across to Ryan Giles on the left-hand side. He got down the left-hand side. Lovely cross to the near post for Ollie McBurney to kind of scoot in and scoop over Lawrence Vigouroux in the Swansea goal, and that was 1-1 at half-time. And then second half, City were really good at the start of the second half. They had a wonderful chance from Giles' cross, from Louis Coyle's cross for Gowhart to head down into the ground, and the goalkeeper made an absolutely outstanding save. And they were pushing City to get that second goal to go in front. But then the Achilles heel, they're on the attack. Swift counter, lose the ball. Joseph loses it. Lundstrom gets turned in the centre of the park, and then they just make it's an absolute mess. They don't stop the cross from Inuesa, who ironically was a target for City a couple of years ago. The young lad, the young winger, Zaidan Inuesa. He crosses, and then Hughes and Joseph have gone all at sea, and Ronald, probably their best player, is given the freedom in the box to poke in from 12 yards out, and suddenly out of nothing again, City are 2-1 down. And it was like the Alamo at times as the game wore on. With City pressing, he threw on Mo Balumi, he threw on Joel Ndana, Darko JB came on for his debut, Regan Slater came on, and Enis Destan came on, and they were throwing the kitchen sink at Swansea, who were just camped. They couldn't get out of their own half, bar the odd kind of foray forward. It was I say like the Alamo. They were pushing and pushing and pushing, and it kind of felt like it was going to be just one of those days where they were going to get nothing from it. The goalkeeper made an absolutely outstanding save, to deny Gowhart. He denied Mo Balumi. Destan saw a header saved. Ben Cabango, their captain, made a fantastic block to deny Egan. Egan was going to score, and out of nowhere, Cabango stopped the goal. And you're just thinking that they were knocking on the door, bang, 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 and it did have that feeling until they kept going. And saying the referee David Webb, who I thought was very good today, and to be fair, Jakirovic echoed those thoughts. He thought the referee was exceptional. I'm not sure Swansea agreed. They were unhappy with 7 minutes of added time, and it was in that 7th minute that Regan Slater had a volley which was going in the bottom corner. It was blocked, and Egan with an absolute rocket of a volley off his right peg into the bottom corner. I kind of feel like the lads at the club were a bit harsh, saying it was a bundled equaliser, Egan had a bit of a laugh about that at the end, because I'm not sure you can class it as a bundled equaliser, but in fairness, it all happened so very quickly. But that was it, and JB made even after that. Then suddenly, it's funny how football works, because for the previous 20 minutes or so, Swansea were camped on the edge of their box. They couldn't get out. City were cross after cross after cross, chance after chance. And that was that. Then they equalise, and suddenly City go back and sit on the edge of their box, and it's Swansea who are trying to find that winning goal again. And JB made a really good header away. McBurney with a header away, and that the referee called time eventually. But look, I think today was really important, that given they'd lost the 2 games, and look, you're going to lose games in the Championship. It's a mental league. We all know that. But I think it was the manner of the defeats, the 3-0 at home to Blackburn. Yes, there was illness in the camp, but they were poor. They were tepid against Blackburn. Then at Bristol City, obviously they lost 4-2. They conceded 4 goals, conceded 29 shots. So I think today was really important, just to stem the tide of defeats. 3 defeats in a row would have been, damaging going into that game against Southampton. this time next week. So I think the confidence they'll get from that, and look, the way they played second half, the way they knocked it around, the chances, 15 chances. That was more than Bristol. I keep saying Bristol City, more than Swansea. I think Swansea had 9 attempts. The only 2 shots on target for Swansea were the 2 goals, and I think that is. And I know from just speaking to Jakirovic, that was his frustration. Is the manner of the goals. He thinks they deserve the point. I don't think anybody could argue that City weren't valued for that point this afternoon. And when you look at the stats, yes, Swansea had buckets of possession, but as Swansea always do, and they have done, right back to Roberto Martinez, they've always dominated possession. I think they had 75% of it in the first half. They didn't create anything. As I say, there were only 2 shots on target in the entire game with the 2 goals. And the first goal was brilliant forward play from Vipotnik, the way back to goal, turned Hughes and slammed in the corner. Tale of the 2 number 9s, really, with McBurney, then the number 9 scoring the equaliser. But the second goal, the first goal, there were elements of the build-up play from Swansea that City should have stopped at source. But sometimes you have to tip your hat to the striker and say, look, that's a fine goal. The way he back to goal, spins Hughes and rifles bottom corner. You are allowed to concede goals, and you are allowed to put your hand up and go, that's just good forward play. A bit like McBurney, yes, Alan Shearer and Swansea will say we should have stopped Giles's cross. We know that he's a threat. We should have tracked McBurney's run. There was one in the first half. Before that, he got across Cabango and flicked a header wide. Really difficult chance, McBurney. But this time he got in front of him and flicked it over the goalkeeper. Sometimes you just have to credit and say that's good play, good forward play. It happens. But I think the second goal is the one which will really irk City and particularly the gaffer, because again, it's come from a City attack. Their number 8, I thought, was good today. Got past Lundstrom. Lundstrom tried to bring him down. He didn't. He should have brought him down. And then once he gets to the edge of the box, he feeds it wide. The cross, they don't stop the cross. They've all got kind of, it's like watching kids football. They all got attracted to the ball far side. And then Joseph and Hughes, whether they're thinking, I'll leave it for each other, whether they're thinking he's offside, but they just leave Ronald in, as I say, in front of the penalty spot, and he just pokes it past the goalkeeper, Pandor, who had no chance. And suddenly, from a game where you won all, but you've got the momentum, you've just created chances, the crowd are quiet here, Swansea are offering very little, you've then given them the leg up, and suddenly you're behind in the game. So that was a real setback, and they've got to defensively, and they've got to get more control in midfield. We know that. We said that at Bristol. They were better today. Amir with John Lundstrom, but Amir tired as the game wore on. That was always going to happen. He's coming from Turkey. Different level entirely, different pace of the game, intensity. But for 60 minutes, it was a good run out. His crafted ball out for Giles for the first goal was exceptionally good vision. So I think he'll get better, he'll get fitter. And let's be honest, making your debut away at Swansea, that's a difficult game. It's a difficult game. So I thought, there were elements of his performance that were promising today. But I just really like the way second half they just kept pushing, and on another day they don't get anything, and you come away with a 2-1 defeat, and everyone's uptight and angry and all that sort of stuff. But I think the overriding feeling coming away today from here is that there's reasons to be optimistic. They've stopped the rot. They've not lost the game. They've got a terrible record here, as they did at Ashton Gate. You know as well as I do that the last league win here was in 2012. So this is not a good ground for Hull City historically. They lost here last year. They got tonked here under Shota 3-0. They drew 2-2 under Liam when Liam had the likes of Jadon Philogene, who was brilliant last night, wasn't he, for Ipswich against Sheffield United. But it's a good result. I think Swansea have started the season well. They've spent a lot of money as well. So I think, given the context of 2 defeats before the international break, they've come here. They've the manner of fighting back to get a point. And I think it would have been a travesty had they have lost this game, because, as I say, first 40 minutes it was dull, but it came to life once they'd scored, and they responded. And as I say, their goalkeeper for me was man of the match. He made, as I said before, 2 or 3 really, really good saves, genuinely quality saves. And when you think at the other end, Pandor's not had a save to make in the game. Sorry, Jim, you're right, yeah. So they, but I just think, given how hard they had to fight to get something out of it, I think that should stand them in good stead. But obviously you can't stand still. It is only a point. They've not won the game. But now they've got to carry this on. They've got a really tough one next weekend, of course, at the MKM Stadium against Southampton. And the gaffer's talked about we owe the supporters, we owe the fans one because of what happened against Blackburn. So that is their toughest test yet. Of course it is, against the quality of opposition they're going to be facing. and we'll see how they shape up. But I think, look, they've got players coming back. I think Shemi Ajayi and Matt Crooks will be back for Watford. They probably won't make Southampton. Liam Miller could be back in the squad for Southampton. You've obviously had minutes and an hour in the legs of Amir Hadzimijatovic today. Darko Jabi's come off the bench. He's got on the pitch. More minutes. I've just spoke to John Egan, and he said, it's easy to forget he went a long spell without playing. He's back he's still getting up to it. This was always going to be a work in progress with the amount of change, new manager, a lot of new players, a lot of players that have not played a lot of, maybe not played a lot of football, not a huge. You look at Joe Lindala, no experience in the Championship. I thought, was it Richard? I think said that he made a real impact. He did. He was brilliant off the bench. He was direct. He got at them, and particularly against a tiring defence of what Swansea had. I think Ndala looked bright. Great to see Balumi back on again. Again, a real threat. Could have scored at the near post, but the goalkeeper made a great save. So I think, look, going forward, as I said, I think 35 shots on goal. 35 attempts they've had in the last 2 away games alone. There was 20 at Bristol City and 15 here today. That's going forward, and they look really good. If you think of the front four of McBurney, of Gowhart, Miller and Balumi, that's a really exciting front four, supported by Ndala, Akintola, Carl Joseph, etc., etc. It's getting that midfield right. It's getting that midfield tight, where they can start to dictate games of football, because at times they were overrun, and we saw it. We've seen it early in the early weeks of the season. That midfield area is where they've got to find the right balance and get players fit and firing, because at times the back four can be too exposed. But as I say, it was a step in the right direction today. When you look at the chances created against them were lesser today, albeit probably against a side that maybe aren't quite as good going forward as Bristol City were. But look, like I say, I think I'm just pleased for the manager and for the players. They've been able to go away. They've been able to get something from a game they, as I say, psychologically would have been a real kick in the knackers if they'd have lost today, because they did not deserve to. But that's football. Lee, I agree with you. Yeah, there was about 400 here away to our left, and it was reminiscent of not in numbers, of course, but in terms of Sheffield Wednesday last season, when Charlie scored that equaliser the winner at Sheffield Wednesday late on at Hillsborough back in April. Not a winner today for John Egan, but another memory away from home, another late goal that means something. And I think, for the fans that did travel here today, particularly given what happened here on Good Friday, when Egan was that penalty decision was a disgrace. That cost City on that day. I mean, let's be honest, they were rubbish. That Good Friday, they didn't. I mean, you're stretching it to say they deserved anything from that game, but they were harshly done to. But a much more vibrant performance, and I think, as I say, there's a lot to admire about their forward play, about their attacking play, the chances they create. And the gaffer, I think, is right when he says that it's easier to sort out the defence. It's easier to toughen up. Obviously, Ajayi will make a difference. Charlie, and again, Charlie had a rocky game at times today, and badly cut out of position for the second goal, turned expertly for the first goal. But it's easy to forget that Charlie's only 21, and because of he's become such a pivotal figure at Hull City, because of the interest, the £10 million bid from Coventry. You almost expect more of him, and that's right. He's a hugely talented young player, but he's still only 21. He's still got he's only played a handful of games at this level, and young players are going to make mistakes. Young players are going to, they're learning on the job in front of 15, 16,000 people against very, very good players, and sometimes it's going to go wrong. Sometimes, and when they make a mistake, it will get punished, and that is, unfortunately for Charlie at the minute, he's going through a spell where perhaps things aren't going well for him, but he's 21. It's going to happen, of course, and I think he needs to be given the room to make those mistakes. If he's going to become a top defender, as we expect him to, he is going to make mistakes, and because of the position he plays, invariably that's going to lead potentially to a goal. If he's going to play in the Premier League, he's got to get used to it, because he will get punished, and if he does make the most basic error, a tiny error in the top flight, that will turn into a goal. And he come up against a very good striker today in Vipotnik, who Jurkovic knows well from Maribor, by the way, and he got punished. But as I say, at times they were better, and the fact they've conceded only 2 attempts on target is progress. It's just unfortunate that those two attempts on target both led to goals. But as I say, they've got something out of the game, and you move on. Anything else to mention The owner was here today. He was wearing a very similar coat to the one he wore a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, when Shotta's team were. You remember when Figueiredo slipped and they got punished. It was just an absolute cluster, you know what, and the owner, with 10 seconds to go, stood up and marched out and eventually sacked Shotta before the next game. Very different affair today. Lots of celebrations in that director's box just away to my left there, and I think he would have been impressed, particularly with what he saw second half. And he knows. I was chatting to him before. I was chatting to Adjun Eligella before the game. He came into the press room and he knows it's got to be. He talks about patience. He talks about the need to give it time. And he knows that this manager is still young in this league. He's an experienced manager, but he's not managing the Championship, so he's going to make mistakes. And because of the whole change around the football club, it is going to take time. I think, because of the win against Oxford, the point at Coventry, expectations rose. And then you get a couple of bad defeats, and suddenly, it's panic stations. But I think, this team will get better as the season wears on because they have got some good players. They've made some great signings. And it is going to, I know nobody wants to hear it because we want Rome built yesterday. Everything needs to happen now or yesterday. But I do think that as the season wears on, they will get better. They will create chances, as we're seeing. If they can just figure out how to be a bit more tight, and it's that difficult balancing act, isn't it? Between being expansive and creating chances, but also being resolute and tight defensively so you're not shipping 20 attempts on your goal every week. Well, 9 attempts today, 2 goals. The 2 goals were shocking, but that is a step forward compared to Bristol. Brian, in terms of Amir and did you say Amir and Destan? I thought, as I said before, so apologies if I'm repeating myself, but I thought Hadzimitovic looked bright. I thought he clearly is very good on the ball. He's clearly a very good footballer. And as I said earlier, his ball, the way, if you've not seen the replay, he gets the ball, turns back on himself and just bends left-footed out to Giles, who then crosses for the goal. Great vision, great awareness, and that for me is, shows that he's got a really good football brain. It's whether he's got the legs at the age of 28, having played in Turkey for 10 years, and we know historically players coming from Turkey have really struggled with the step up in intensity and tempo that we have in English football. But again, he's not played for a while. It was his first game, and this is a really difficult first game against a side away from home who genuinely dominate the ball. So I thought he was good. I thought Destan looked bright. He got involved. He had the header. He runs onto it and heads it straight down at the goalkeeper. If maybe a yard either side, he scores. There was another one he had blocked, but he was, he caused problems. And again, that's his first game in Yonk. So he will be better for coming off the bench, and he will get confidence from the fact the team have not lost the game and the manner of getting that 97th minute equaliser. And as I say, I think they'll start to get fitter. I touched on it just a moment ago about John Egan. He was out for a long time. He's still, he said himself, this is his longest run of games. Well, he might be back out the team when Shemi Ajayi is fit, we expect, for Watford. So, so many players, and Darla's not played a lot of football. Bloom is coming back from an ACL. Miller will be back potentially in the squad for Southampton, not played in best part of a year. So, again, without wishing to labour the point and play the club party line about it needs time, he's got to get results. Of course he has. He needs, you can't stand still in the Championship, and you can't keep going, well, we'll wait for all our better players to get fit. You've got to get results, and we saw that the danger of that last season of waiting until the August window had closed before knowing what squad we'd got. Well, by that point, you've not won a game and you've got no momentum, and you're suddenly already chasing your tail. Well, they've picked up some early points. It's not been an amazing start. A win, a couple of draws, and a couple of defeats, but it's given them a foundation to go forward. And I do think they will get better as the weeks go on. Once these players get used to playing with each other, some of them getting used to playing in Darla's case in the Championship at this level, and like JB, he's played 50 odd games in the Championship, but he's only just arrived. So lots to. I do think they're in a far, far better place, of course, than this time last year. And yeah, Robert, I agree. They battled. I've seen performances here before. The Shotta performance was so cowardly is probably a bit strong, but it was a spineless performance. It was one of those. We've all seen enough football to know what a sacking performance looks like, and that was one of them. And eventually, 2 weeks later than it should have happened, Shotta, lovely guy, but not cut out, and he was gone. that today was a performance of real grit and determination, and also a togetherness. You know, that was the scenes at the end, the celebrations, the way they fought for the manager themselves, the fans. It was a really good, encouraging thing. Now, it will count for little if they go and get tonked 5-0 at home to Southampton next week. So, you know, you're only as good as your last result, and they've now got to go out and keep proving it and keep getting better. Charlie, in terms of Carl Joseph, yeah, look, he scored a fine goal against Bristol City. He had in fairness to Kyle, he had a difficult job today, I thought, because he was playing off McBurney, but he was also having to track back and do a defensive job. He's never been in his career a prolific goal scorer. That's not his game. And ultimately he's going to be playing second fiddle, I think, once Miller and Bellumi are back. But he's a useful player to have in the squad. He works hard. He'll watch that second goal back and he'll be fuming with himself, because I know Carly's he's got high standards. He thinks, he works really hard. He cares deeply, and he'll look at that and he'll be really disappointed that he's not dealt with it. That he's not tracked Ronald and he's given him a free shot. But realistically, Carl at the minute probably isn't in that first 11. But he's an able player to be brought on. For McBurney, if McBurney tires. I would worry if McBurney gets injured. I thought McBurney ran the line really well today. His hold-up play, his battling abilities, etc., really good. Terrific finish for the goal as well. Real Predators finish, something that City haven't had. But you've got Destan as well. And we'll see more of Destan as the weeks go on. It's too early to judge him yet on that 20 minutes or whatever it was in the end. But as I say, the signs look promising. But I wouldn't want to write Kyle off, because I think he's got a job to do in the squad, but I just don't think he isn't the answer to the goal scoring problems. He isn't going to score 20 goals a season, but I do think he can chip in with one or two here and there when he comes in, when he's called upon. But as I say, he isn't at that level where he's going to be starting ahead of McBurney if McBurney's fit and available. Robert, agree with what you say about clean sheets. They need to it doesn't take Stevie Wonder to work that one out, but you need. They've got to be tighter. They've conceded goals in every, at least 2 goals in every game since Coventry, and the Coventry game is starting to look like a one-off. Whether it's solely down to Shemi Ajay, I doubt. But they've got to, and it's not. It's easy to pick out Giles or Drame, who was dropped today for Louis Coyle, or Hughes, Egan, or even the midfield. I just think it's a collective. They've got to be better. They've got to be far better as a collective unit at stopping players running through and getting crosses in at will and tracking runners. Is it down to concentration? The 2 goals today, particularly the second one. I mean, Akintola's probably got to do better for the first goal. Charlie Hughes, is he too tight on Vipotnik? Possibly. Again, as I said before, hand up. Sometimes you put your hand up and say that's a great goal. But the second goal was a shambles. From the moment their number 8 wins it right on the halfway line, right in front of where we were sat, and he drives through midfield, feeds it wide to Inuesa, who then crosses unmarked for Ronald. I mean, that's a shambles. They've got so many players. It's not like they were caught. Yes, it was a counter-attack, yes, but they still had. If you watch it back, they had. There's a lot of amber shirts back there, and they've just kind of, it's like after you, Claude, and looking round as if to say, what's going on here? And then Ronald stuck it in the net. But they've got to tighten up. That was something they did well, that Ruben did well last season. He made City really tight defensively, completely impotent going forward, never looked like they were going to score a goal. But defensively, they were really tight. Now, Jakirovic has got an attacking unit here that's dangerous. 35 chances created in 2 games. And 4 goals away from home. That's not bad, but he's got to find a way to get that. Not sacrifice is the attacking instincts and the attacking ability, but find a way to get that team a little bit more resolute defensively and keep teams at arm's length and not allow them to get quite so close to their penalty area. But as I say, if you come away from home and you've only let the home team have 9 shots on your goal and 2 on target, on paper you go, that's not bad. The caveat, of course, is both those shots have gone in. And Robert Hughes isn't. No disrespect to Charlie, but he's not Premier. He isn't at the Premier League level. If he went to a Premier League team, he wouldn't play. I look at I look at Erin Cashin as an example, who had played an awful lot more games in the Championship and League One with Derby County, and there was talk about Erin Cashin going to Brighton for quite a while, and then he eventually went to Brighton, and he couldn't get in the team, and now he's back on loan in the Championship with Birmingham. And that should serve as a warning for Charlie that Erin Cashin, and he's left-footed as well, he's a very, very good defender as Erin Cashin. But he hasn't been able to break through. I'm not saying, and every player is different, of course they are, and every situation is different. But Charlie Hughes is not ready for Premier League football. If he'd have got, it's hypotheticals because it didn't happen, but if he'd have got a Premier League move in January, in the summer, he wouldn't have got, there's no team in the Premier League that are playing Charlie Hughes every week. Just, there isn't, because he's not at that level. And that's why nobody from the Premier League came and bought him. That may well happen next summer. But Charlie has to play, and he needs to be robust enough and strong enough to play 40 games plus this season. He had 2 long spells out last season with appendicitis and I think it was a hamstring problem. So he missed. He only played 26 games, I think. So he missed a large percentage of last season. If he's going to make that step up, he's got to play a lot more games this season. But he's also got to be given the room to develop and to make mistakes, which he's done today, and he did at Bristol City. And we shouldn't hammer him for that, because he's a young player making his way in the game. And he puts his head above the parapet. He's big, he's strong, and everybody loves him. And he will go on and play in the Premier League. But he's nowhere near at that level yet. And that's the fact. That's based on the fact that nobody from the Premier League came in with more than £10 million this summer. So, I think a lot of Premier League teams are watching him, and there will be scouts all season that watch Charlie, and they'll have him on their radar, and they may well come and try and buy him in January. But Jurkovic is absolutely right when he says that he's got to stay in the Championship. And you look at Greavesy. Greavesy played 200 times for City before he got his move to Ipswich in the Premier League. Yeah, okay, he's back in the Championship now, but Greavesy earned that move. Jacob Greaves earned that move to the Premier League because he was. Not only he was a League One title winner, but he was consistently one of the best central defenders in the Championship every single week, and he was durable. He played every single week. He was rarely, a bit like in a similar sense to McLaughlin and Jones, who of course we've lost. Greavesy was always available. So Charlie's got to do that. Yeah, Robert, I love watching football. I'm in a privileged position, despite all the chaos going on around the industry and hundreds of people losing their jobs. I'm really privileged to do this job, and I love watching them play, and I love watching Hull City play, and I just want them to do well. That's my like everybody else. We come here and we want them to win. We don't want them to lose. We want them to win games and get promoted. And I am encouraged. I'm really. I really like. I've said this a million times. I really like the gaffer. I think I like the cut of his jib. I think he's a really good, really nice bloke. The players, you can tell he's the sort of guy that the players want to play for. And you've got to give him the time and space. He's never managed. He's managed Dynamo Zagreb in the Champions League, so he's managed huge football clubs in huge games. But this thing here, the Championship, is like nothing else. So it will take him time to adapt, and you have to allow him to make mistakes. And there'll be times in games where he makes errors, but all managers do. Even the best make mistakes. But I really like Jurkovic. I really want him to do well. I like a lot of what I'm seeing, and as I say, if they can tighten up at the back end of the pitch, then they're going to do really well. And look, they're scoring goals. They couldn't score for Toffee last season. Never looked like scoring either. Rarely. Okay, Sheffield United away, great. Barely looked like scoring under Ruben, and even under Tim. After that kind of like the 4 against Cardiff and goals of QPR in that and Stoke, that bizarre week where they won 3 games in a row. Never looked really, in the season. They just looked awful up front. But this time they don't. As I say, they've scored 4 goals in the last 2 away games, and I'm enthused. I think some of their attacking players are really, really exciting. I like the idea of JB's 21, great age. He's their own player. He's on a long-term contract. So the club needs to get to a stage where there isn't 12, 13, 14 players coming because that many have left. You need to get to a stage where you're only doing a little bit of transfer business, because you've got a core of a squad. It's not that easy when you're a Championship club. thrown to the fact that you've not got parachute payments and you aren't the wealthiest club. It's not that easy. But they've got a lot of the core of their group now is their own. Yes, if they don't get promoted next summer, then there will be players that leave. Maybe Bellumi goes, maybe Charlie Hughes goes. What their situation is with the transfer restrictions, we'll have to wait and see whether they can in fact return to normal and they can go and buy players again. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But I like the look of their squad. They've got a lot more balance. They've got options. As I said, I'm still got one or two concerns, but name me a club in the Championship where I think if you spoke to any of their fans, their reporters, or the staff at the club wouldn't go, yeah, our squad's perfect. From 1 to 11, they're perfect, and 8 subs, 9 subs, the rest of our squad is absolutely perfect. It's not realistic. That isn't really. There's nobody in the Championship that has got the perfect squad. So there are weaknesses. Of course, there's weaknesses. Of course, there are. But as I say, I think there's a lot to admire about what the gaffer's trying to do here, and I'm conscious of not trying to get too ahead because they've only drawn 2-2 at Swansea. But as I said before, it's a really important line in the sand after those defeats to come here and get something, and in the manner they've done it should give them a real shot in the arm for the rest of the season, particularly the next few weeks, because they've got some really difficult games coming up before the next international break. But the Southampton game will be a very, very different game entirely, and they'll probably not. I say different game, maybe similar in the sense of, Swansea had a lot of the ball today. You'd imagine Southampton under Will Still will do the similar. They'll have a lot of the ball, so City will have to play on the counter and be resolute. So perhaps today is a good warm up for that. We'll have to wait and see. But they are at home, and fans will expect them to go out and be on the front foot, which they are. They're a front-footed team, sometimes to their detriment, and that is the way it goes. But look, I thought second half they were good. Just quickly, Mohamed, Crooks and Ajayi are due back for the Watford game. So a week, basically 2 weeks today. So Southampton at home next Saturday, then away at Watford in 2 weeks. So we expect Ajayi and Crooks to be back for that game. Miller potentially back in the squad for Southampton next week. And right, long journey home, so I'm going to call it a day here, and I'm slightly concerned the car park might be closed when I get back, so that might pose me a little problem. But anyway, that's for me to worry about. Lee mentioned it earlier on. Credit to the 400 or so fans that made the trek down here. I know it's a long, long way. Ticket prices are expensive. Travel's expensive. So the support were great, and you got your rewards at the end. We'll have the podcast for you at some point on Monday. If you've not caught up with the latest episode, my chat with Darko JB is on all good podcast websites and probably the rubbish ones too. So give that a listen. He's really interesting chat with him, and you can catch up on all the old episodes as well. As I say, we'll have the latest episode with the band back together on Monday at some point, looking back on this game and looking ahead to Southampton. If I've forgot anything, I apologise, but I'm now over 40, so I've got an excuse of forgetting things. I'm going to go off and find something to eat, and hopefully my car is still available. Thanks for watching, everybody. Appreciate your comments, questions as always. Keep them coming. Get your questions to the at the 1904 Club on Twitter, and we'll do our best to answer them on Monday's show. And we'll be with the manager next week and a player ahead of the home game against Southampton. And we'll see you then. Up the Tigers.